Welcome to the Catte talking about reading the Horus Heresy. Oh my god! Look, there's Sanguinius, he's a skull. Look, it's Rogel Dorn, he's saying it is cringe, rather. There's Alfarius, kinda behind me, doing Alfarius things. Me am Emperor, me am Horus, me am Heresy. Anyway, I hope that you all will enjoy me talking about this. So, I've read 37 or 39 of the Horus Heresy books, and you may be wondering, wait, Kat, why are you saying 37 or 39? Okay, so, it seems like some people track some of the books a little differently. So on Wikipedia, it does not include the Fury of Magnus or Garrow, the last Garrow book, which I think is like Garrow Knight and Grey, which are two, like, novellas. They're shorter ones that are in, like, the Siege of Terra series. But I've read both of those, and I think it makes more sense to me that they're included in that because they have plot elements and things like that, you know, so it's kind of important. But the kind of main thing here is that I've read a lot of these books. In the series, if you do not include those two novellas, there are going to be 64 books, with The End and the Death Volume 3 being the last of the books. As far as I understand currently now, I don't think they're going to continue anything after that. Pretty sure The End and the Death Volume 3 is like the end of the Horus Heresy series. So there's either 64 or 66. Either way, I've read more than half. I've gotten quite a lot of enjoyment out of some of the books, and some of them I think are very silly. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things I noticed, and some of the things I like, and some of the things I don't like. I thought it would be cool. So, we'll go. There's Alfarius smiling. Look at his big old teeth. I do like learning. One of the things I've really enjoyed about going through so many of these books is that there's a ton of little lore details. There's a ton of little things that really pop up that make me go, oh wow, that's actually pretty interesting. The raptors, for instance, from Deliverance Lost are pretty neat. This isn't really spoiling the plot of that book. Basically, there's a part where Corvus Corax is making better space marines with the science of the Emperor. So that's kind of cool. There's also some really interesting little things, like you can learn about some particular characters. You also learn some little things that are kind of dumb. Like, the reason it's called the Land Raider isn't because it's a raider on land. It is because the guy who discovered the STC is Arkan Land. Just like there's the Land Speeder. Same guy. And I think that's kind of funny. There's lots of little things like that that you can get if you read a lot of these books. Some books are actually pretty much only good, like if you're interested in just the plot of the Horus Heresy, I would argue there's plenty of books that you can skip. But there's a lot of little interesting lore details in some of the books that are not like super important for the main plot. For instance, Outcast Dead has a bunch of things that I personally think are pretty interesting within it that are not, like Outcast Dead itself, I don't think it's very important for the main story of the Horus Heresy. You don't need to read it, but it has some interesting stuff in it. Another thing I've noticed is that everybody's a Manbaby. And by the way, that's Lorgar there, and it's "Have you lost your temper, Rabute?" And then it's Rabute crying, going, "I'm going to gut you," which is kind of funny. Something I noticed that was kind of weird is that almost every character in the Horus Heresy who's like a Primarch or like a big important person cannot seem to tolerate people like not just obeying them. Even loyalist Primarchs, in a couple of cases, have killed dudes just for not obeying them and wanting to argue with them and not going along with whatever their plan is. There's also stuff where it's like, it's kind of funny. Some of the Primarchs get so mad over like stuff that really does not feel like they should be that mad about. Or like, you know, some characters just literally do it constantly, where it's like every other scene it seems like they're mad about something not going their way. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this. Vulcan is an exception to this. Alfarius is an exception to this. Alfarius I actually really like because he encourages his men to question him, and he also encourages, you know, well, not just his men, because he also has female agents and stuff like that. He encourages all the people under his command. Question him, think about what you're doing, don't just blindly accept orders. You know, Jagatai Khan, I haven't read anything where he gets into a man-baby rage. One that I think got a lot of man-baby rages that's kind of annoying, and part of the reason I don't like the character very much is Rogel Dorn. I'm going to get into that because there's a part of this video where I just talk about my shifting perspective on different Primarchs and things like that. Oh, actually, one second. Okay. Now, yeah, so anyway, there's some that are good, but a lot of them are just like these tyrants that I think I don't like very much. The writing is all over the place in terms of quality. That's another thing I've noticed. Some books are very well written and have really great characters. I recently just finished a book that was literally getting me like hype. Like I was like, oh my god, that's so good. And then there's other books where I'm just like, wow, this is terrible and boring. Why on earth is this even here? A good portion of the books seem to have like nothing going on and feel like filler. Sometimes the writing becomes very repetitive. In particular, I'm thinking in Prospero Burns, there is a lot of wet leopard growls and leopard growls. That was like a lot. It was like a tick at a certain point when the guy was describing the Space Wolves. And I'm also putting Ben Counter's Battle for the Abyss up here because it's not the worst book ever, but it's pretty... It really doesn't feel like it matters for like the grand scheme of things, and part of the reason I actually read it was because everybody was saying just skip this one, and I kind of wanted to see why it was constantly being... Everyone was just like, yeah, skip this one, don't bother with this one is not great. And now I know for sure why people were saying that. Some characters really start to feel like they just have like one personality trait and they just display it over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and it's just like, wow, just stop. Or like, you know, the word bearers go from being like these really devout, kind of interesting characters, I think, to like as they become traitors, just being like terrible and like I just constantly being like mustache twirling villains and getting a little... That gets really kind of repetitive and tiresome for me. Now that's not to say there are no good word bearer novels or there are no good or interesting word bearer characters, but a lot of them get into that and I think it gets just really bad. Something I do think is great though is the way they show how Horus has changed is great. They show how far he's fallen and they show how Chaos uses people as puppets. But something that's very interesting is I had never, until I started reading all these books in order, well, not all in order, but reading a lot more of the books. The first three books really paint Horus in a very particular way, and you can already see that his fall by the, or like how he's falling by the end of the third book. But you know, to have read those and also have read the Siege of Terra series and you know some of the ones before that, we're seeing like where Horus has gone and how Chaos has like completely corrupted him. I think they did a really good job with that, showing, because I think Horus is for the most part pretty likable. He has a little bit of that man baby thing I was talking about earlier, where he gets mad if you even like slightly disobey him or don't like just immediately acquiesce to whatever it is he wants. But I think he still has a pretty noble and interesting character, especially at the beginning. But then as it goes on, he gets more and more difficult to forgive for what he's doing, and I think he becomes less and less understandable because it starts to get more and more to a point where like, oh, he's just doing this for him. Like he can make excuses all he wants, but it's for him and the Chaos Gods, and really he still thinks for him. And there's a piece of Rogel Thornheart. But one of the things that has happened as I've read more and more of these books is I've gotten changing opinions on some of the legions and the Primarchs. Some of the ones I used to like, I now really kind of dislike, and then other ones that I really disliked, I actually ended up turning around on. And there were a couple that I was just kind of completely blank towards, had no strong feelings one way or the other, and then by the time I had finished reading the books I've read, I'm like, I detest this character. I think that some of them are just very bad, and I don't understand the appeal. But anyway, we'll get into it later a little bit. These are Primarchs I don't care about. Perturabo, Horus, the Lion, Corvus Corax, Mortarion, Blood Angels, and Blood Angels, because I separate them from Sanguinius here, and the World Eaters. The World Eaters and Blood Angels I separate from their Primarchs because I think their Primarchs are interesting, but I think the characters and the general Legion themselves, in terms of the Blood Angels and the World Eaters, are just not that interesting to me. I think that Sanguinius has a lot of interesting character traits, and you can kind of dissect him, dissect his motivations and things like that. Perturabo has one book in which I actually felt for him and thought he was really interesting, and almost every other book I noticed, especially some of the ones I kind of went back to and reread, I just find that I dislike him more and more. Or, well, not even necessarily dislike him, but I just kind of don't care about, like, what he does. The Horus starts in the first 3 books where I think he's a really interesting character, and almost everything after that, I have to admit, I just find him very bland. And he's just this kind of generic villain that I think they do a decent job with, but at the same time, I don't really care about Horus. I don't really care about his motivations or why he's doing what he's doing. The Lion, during the Horus Heresy, is a character I don't like very much, but partially because he redeems himself so much in the 42nd millennium with that book. I have a little bit more of a indifferent feeling. Like there's a lot of things I think he did which are very kind of scummy during the Horus Heresy, and I also think that he is one of the biggest Manbaby don't disobey me kind of characters, but at the same time, because he turns around so much, it kind of makes me like him more. So, but at least for when we're talking about the Heresy, this is where I'd put him. I don't really care about him. I have opinions on him, but not. I don't really know if I care that much overall. Corvus Corax has some cool moments, I guess, but for the most part, I just don't care. If it wasn't for Deliverance Lost, I don't even think I would probably hardly remember Corvus Corax. His Legion, the Raven Guard, which I think I may have actually forgotten to put in here because I don't and for some of them, it is also their Legion. Like, I would say with Corvus Corax, the Raven Guard is kind of, I don't really care about. I think they're cool in the sense that they have the stealth thing going on, but I don't really care. Mortarion, same thing. I think Mortarion's kind of lame. I don't think he's the worst. I don't think he's not like some of the characters I'll talk about where I don't like them, where I like really kind of want to skip past everything they're doing. It's more just like, I just don't really care. I don't really care about the Death Guard. I don't care about the Death Guard in 40k. I don't care about the Death Guard in the Horus Heresy. The one Death Guard I care about is Garrow, because Garrow is awesome. But most of them I think are pretty boring, and I just don't. I'm not. And also when he actually goes over to Nurgle, it is just kind of like, oh, that's lame, but you know, it is what it is. And here, now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Primarchs that I in Legions I kind of love. Dark Angels. I really like the Legion of the Dark Angels. I really like all their stories. Descent of Angels and Fallen Angels and Angels of Caliban. I like the Dark Angels in all those stories. I like everything that they're doing. I think that they're very interesting. And I think that the testing loyalties on Caliban, going on with Luther and all that different stuff, is really neat, and I really appreciate that. Even though I think the Lion is pretty lame, or kind of lame at least. White Scars and the Khan, some of my absolute favorites. I love that the Khan at least recognizes that the Emperor is a tyrant, but and ultimately what it boils down to is the other person that he could choose to go with is much worse, and he eventually realizes that, and he also realized that even though the Emperor is a tyrant, it's like, okay, at least for now we have to help and we have to defend this and we have to do this. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that they actually seem to have at least some self-awareness. Angron is a very tragic character in many respects, and I think that he also has an accurate opinion of the Emperor. I also really like when he beats the living shit out of another character that I dislike. And I like that he screams about, "What would you know, perfect son?" That whole thing where he just destroys Gilliman and his hypocrisy and his notions of honor and all these things is just great. Leman Russ and the Wolves. This is actually one that I kind of flipped around, because I used to really not care about Leman Russ, and I used to think that the Wolves were just especially a boring legion. And I will say, in 40k, every time I've read a 40k book that's about the wolves, even if it's the Ragnar Blackmane series, and I know people love those books, but I just do not get into them. I don't think they're very interesting, etc. But after reading Prospero Burns and a couple of other books where the wolves actually take a significant role, I think they actually write them very well sometimes. And I've discovered that I actually really like Lehman sometimes. I'm like in Wolfsbane, I think like Lehman reflecting back on his encounters with Horus and what's going on is just really good. And I think that the wolves having this determination, this is like, no, we're going to push forward and fight no matter what's happening, is pretty neat. Alpharius and the Alpha Legion, probably my favorite Trader Legion, easily. Probably the only Trader Legion I actually like, really. Like, I think that they have more interesting characters. I would say that Sons of Horus kind of go right back into the other thing where it's like with Horus, so, yeah, I don't really care that much. But Alpharius and the Alpha Legion, right up my alley, as well as in 40k. I really like Alpharius. I really enjoyed reading his Primarch book. I really enjoy most of the books he's in, and I think that he is one that just realizes, hey, I'm a tool, I'm getting a job done, and he's just very practical. One thing I kind of dislike about some of the Space Marine stuff is that sometimes they get a little bit too into that whole honor and warrior type mentality, and I understand that's part of the appeal, but sometimes to me it's just like, okay, no, just take a sniper rifle, sniper rifle, blow their brains out, destroy them, and move on. Don't do all this other nonsense. And I really like that. Sanguinius is someone that I think is a really good character. I think that even though sometimes he strikes me as maybe a little too perfect, I think that the fact that he has these tragic visions of the future, and they kind of keep like pushing him around, is very interesting, and I really like him. And he gives a speech during the Lost and the Damned, and he also kills one of the other Primarchs during that. And I'm just like, yes, I really like this guy. I think, even though for a while I was like, maybe this guy's kind of overrated, reading about him more, I'm like, I actually really like this guy. I'm gonna skip Vulcan for a second, talk about Lorgar. Lorgar is a Primarch that I both like a lot and really dislike. He's gonna be in both sections. Lorgar, before he goes full chaos, when he's like just searching for the truth and going through, and like in the books like Aurelian and Lorgar, Bearer of the Word, and Betrayer. Well, Betrayer is pretty chaos, but there's a First Heretic especially. I think he's a great character, and I think that he's one of the most human Primarchs, and I really like that about him, and I think he's very interesting. I think the further you get into the heresy, though, the worse he gets, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we go to the ones I dislike. And now I'm just gonna say, Vulcan, I had a complete turnaround. I went from not caring at all about Vulcan to, in the space of one book, Vulcan Lives. I read Vulcan Lives recently. I just love Vulcan, and I started realizing that as I went through more Salamanders related books, I really like Vulcan, and I really like the Salamanders. And it was kind of weird because I just hadn't really had that much of a feeling or opinion on him for a long time. But then, like, reading Vulcan Lives and the things he does to Conrad Kurz, and like him breaking past all of the despair and all the torture and things, and being Vulcan, and like really showing that good can triumph over evil. I have to admit, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was hyped for that. I would highly recommend Vulcan Lives. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more of the books he's in, like Old Earth and some of the other ones. And of course, he's in the Siege. He's in parts of the Siege where he does some pretty cool stuff, and he's also just, Vulcan, so he's awesome, man. He's also really strong, and that's kind of neat, big, strong guy. And if there was a lady Vulcan, I would definitely like that Lynn. Oh, and here's Primarchs I've come to dislike or hate. I'm not necessarily going to go in these in order here as much. I'll start with the Lorgar, just because I already mentioned him. As they get more chaosified, as they get more like that, I find their character getting worse and worse and worse until I'm eventually just like, okay, mustache twirling villains, really not into it anymore. That kind of sucks. But I think that he starts great, and as it goes on, he just gets worse and worse until eventually it's just like, wow, this kind of blows, and I kind of wish he would just stop. Magnus is a character that I would think I would like, but almost every time I read about him in any of the books he was in, I just hate him. Well, hate's probably a strong word because he's a fictional character, but I really dislike him. He thinks he's so smart, but he's so dumb. He does things that are so dumb, and the Thousand Sons along with him do things that are so dumb. It just makes you wonder, like, what were they thinking? Why did they write him like this? And when he gets cornered in Nikea, and they're talking about, yeah, we're gonna make it so you can't experiment with the warp stuff at all. He quotes Shakespeare to people like Mortarion and tries to convince them with lines from Shakespeare. The guy's a nerd, and I don't, you know, not that I have a problem with nerd, but he's like a nerd in such a way where, like, he doesn't seem to have any real social skills, and he's pretty dumb with the things he actually does. He's just like, yeah, I quoted Shakespeare, you guys have to listen to me now. It's like, what? No. Terrible. I really don't like him. Gilliman is a massive hypocrite, and I think that he's better in 40k than he is in 30k, but just being this privileged son who supports authority, who's a bootlicker, who's like, the line, there's a line when after they've destroyed Monarchia, Lorgar is so mad and he wants to strike Gilliman, and Gilliman's just like, are you done with your tantrum? And it's like, dude, fuck off. You're just a bootlick. You just love that, oh, daddy approved of me, and now I get to destroy your city. And it's just like, dude, come on. And of course later on he's like, I don't hate you, Lorgar. It's like, what do you mean you don't hate him? What do you mean? They're like, oh, I don't hate you. It's like, you just watch his activity. It doesn't make any fucking sense for him to say that. But then on top of that, I love that Angron just calls him out for all of his bullshit. Like, oh yeah, Angron, you're so rude and mean and such a savage. It's like, yeah, and you gave up any principles you had so that you could serve this obvious tyrant. So, whatever, bro. It's like, yeah, I really like him getting his shit pushed in there. Ferrus Manus is one that I don't think I had that strong of a feeling on until he said one particular set of lines with Fulgrim, where, okay, there's a part where they're fighting, and then Ferrus is like, he looks at Fulgrim, and there's all these corpses and all this terrible stuff around. He's like, how can a better world be built on corpses? And it was just a line that just made me hate Ferrus. I already didn't really like Ferrus because he kept getting mad and kept like letting his rage get the better of him. But doing that and then being like, yeah, how can a future be built? How can a good future be built on corpses? It's like, excuse me, what have you been doing the entire time? You've been in the Great Crusade murdering people, genociding entire civilizations. You have been breaking people mercilessly against your knee, and just with force and brutality at every point. You don't get to say, how can a good future be built on corpses? Because you're only saying that because it's some people you cared about. It's like disgusting. It's a terrible line, and I'm glad the fucker's dead. Just like Henry Kissinger, I'm glad that guy's dead too. Anyway, yeah, I really don't like Ferrus Manus, and I found that he went from being a character that I just thought was pretty boring to, in the space of a couple books, being a character that I really didn't like. And I hate to say that because I have a friend of mine who really loves Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands, but my god, it's just like terrible, just terrible. And I just really dislike Ferrus. I really dislike Fulgrim, but I kind of already knew I disliked Fulgrim. The one book in which I kind of enjoy Fulgrim is in Angel Exterminatus, where he's just being a theatrical fop, and that's very funny. That's very funny. But, like, yeah, pretty much everything else, like, I don't think that the Emperor's Children were ever a good legion. I don't think that. I think reading everything about them, reading their encounters, they were always just a pompous, terrible legion that I don't like, that has, like, a couple of cool guys in it. Like, a couple. So I really don't like Fulgrim. I also really think that it's kind of hard to take him. I read the Fulgrim book, and I had skimmed through it, and I had done parts of it before, but I decided to actually sit down and read the whole thing. And I will say, it's sometimes just read like a comedy. I don't think it's supposed to, but like the way Fulgrim starts to dress and the things he starts to do as Slaanesh just kind of starts to work on them is just like, I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but it's pretty funny. It's not actually horrifying to me. I don't know. Conrad Kurz, I just hate Conrad Kurz. Genocidal madman, pathetic, does nothing but whine about how he's a monster and how he should be dead, and then all this other nonsense, and it's just so tiresome. It's just so edgy, and I just don't want any more books with him. And I'm glad he's dead as well. Rogal Dorn was probably one of the ones I felt had, well, with Ferris Manners, I had two big turnarounds where both those guys, I was like, these guys are boring. Now I really dislike both of them. Rogal Dorn, what I don't like about him is that he's just constantly losing his shit. He's constantly getting angry. He's constantly being like all the time, and it's just so whiny and tiresome. And it's like, nobody talks about that as far as I can tell. I don't know why people like Rogal Dorn so much. I think he's terrible. I think he's a badly written character. I think he's done almost every single thing wrong in terms of like when he's first being delivered the news about Horus's betrayal, rather than listening and trying to figure out what's going on, he strikes the dude and doesn't kill him just because, like, well, he probably has the right information. If you think that there's something to it, don't hit the dude. What the fuck? And he's just constantly like this. When I say Manbaby, I think of Rogal Dorn. I think of Rogal Dorn more than any of them, to be perfectly honest. And I think of Rogal Dorn, and he is probably the Primarch that is now just next to Conrad Kurz. Conrad Kurz is just worse. But he's down there with Conrad Kurz for me now. Magnus too, and it's like, those are the three pretty popular Primarchs. I don't know why Conrad is so popular, but those are three pretty Primarchs. And I know that Conrad supposedly has this sad backstory, but I just don't give a fuck, man. I just don't. Rogal Dorn is just like, yeah, just trash. And you know, if Valrak happens to see this, which probably won't, because these don't get a lot of views, so it's not that big a deal. But sorry, Valrak. I hope you still enjoy Rogal Dorn. I hope you have fun with him. Sorry, everybody who likes any of these Primarchs, but like, man, I read these guys and I'm just like, shut up, stop talking, go away. Like that's just like legitimately the way I feel. And during the End and the Death, Volume 1 and 2, there's a thing with Rogal Dorn that starts to get really repetitive and starts to feel like it's just going nowhere. And maybe it's going somewhere. Maybe we'll get somewhere thing in the last book. I don't know. Really just not feeling it though. I will go over some book recommendations. The first four books in the Horus Heresy I think are great. I think all four of them, even if you're not really super interested in the rest of the series, I think those have some really good writing in them and are really fun. Legion, if you're like me and you're into the Alpha Legion at all, definitely check out Alpha Legion. Descent of Angels, Fallen Angels, also great. First Heretic and Betrayer, I think are really good. Master of Mankind is good for getting into the headspace of the Emperor a little bit more. Wolfsbane is also pretty good. Burning of Prospero. I should put Vulcan Lives in there, but I actually finished Vulcan Lives after I made this, and I corrected one part. I forgot to put Vulcan Lives in this part. Definitely go check out Vulcan Lives. You can skip Battle for the Abyss and most of the anthologies. I think most of the anthologies are just pretty nothing. The last anthology I finished was Talarn, and that was just completely nothing. I don't even know why I bothered with that one, but it was just a bunch of short stories about tanks, and I don't care. Outcast Day was interesting, but not super important to the overall plot. There's some really interesting elements in there, and I think that there's some interesting ideas, but not like, you know, like I said, not super important. Deliverance Lost, it has some neat stuff in it too, and it has a couple of things that I think makes it worth checking out just to see some of the interesting little bits there. And yeah, that's the end. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that you maybe you can share some of your opinions about the Horus Heresy series if you read it. I don't know if I'm going to read all the Horus Heresy books, because there's a lot of books left that I'm just like, I don't really think I care about. There's a decent number of anthologies left that I just don't really know if I have any interest in finishing or reading or even starting. I feel like, honestly, the books I've read have given me most of the story. Occasionally there were some little details missing, but yeah, I'm gonna probably read the rest of the books that with Vulcan as the main focus. but I think beyond that, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm not gonna be done completely, but I might just kind of take a little bit of a break for now, because I've been going kind of nonstop reading a lot of these books, going from, because I went from 21 or 22 to this number here, which is, you know, I'm gonna say 37 or 39, like I said, depending on whether or not you include those two novellas in the Siege series. Some of them are really good, some of them are really bad. It's all over the place. I hope you enjoyed this video. Share your thoughts, and if you think I'm completely wrong about a Primarch, go ahead and share why. You know, whatever you want to do, man. But yeah, I guess like, subscribe, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I hope that you all have a wonderful day. I hope that you know that I love you and God loves you. Bye-bye. I love you. Bye.